Cornell West goes green. This week in the news, Dr. Cornell West switched his allegiance from working primarily with the People's Party to seeking the nomination of the Green Party of the United States. This is Alan Zundel on Political Dharma, and today I'm going to be talking about whether a third-party path is a good option for the left, discussing the pros and cons of the Green Party in particular, and then looking at the nomination process for the presidential candidate of the party, as well as where they have ballot access currently so that Dr. West, if he gets the nomination, could get on the ballot. But let's start with a little updating of the news for those of you who have not been following this, and I doubt if many of my listeners haven't, but a little over a week ago, on Monday, June 5th, Dr. Cornell West, a prominent public intellectual and political activist, announced that he was running with the People's Party to be president of the United States. He went on a number of interviews about this, got a lot of media attention because he is a pretty well-known figure, not on the scale of maybe Bernie Sanders yet, but he's well-known on the left and in circles of active politicians and intellectuals. So he got a lot of attention, but there's a lot of pushback from interviewers, even on the left, about his decision to work with the People's Party, because to sum up the case, the People's Party is not a real party and doesn't have very many people in it. There was more criticism than that about the way the leader of the People's Party, Nick Brana, has been running the party, or misrunning the party, depending on who you talk to. So there was a lot of pushback on that, including on my last episode where I talked about this and said that there was probably a better option for Dr. West to go with the Green Party if he's going to go the alternative party route at all. So Friday it came out that Chris Hedges, his close personal friend and fellow public intellectual, had him in touch with members of the Green Party. And by the following week, it was made public. On Tuesday was the first I heard of it from the Katie Halper show. Here's a little segment of what went on there.
So last week, Chris Hedges, friend of the show, Chris Hedges, said during an event for Workers Strike Back, which was organized by Kshama Sawant, he said that he wanted you to run as a Green Party candidate. And you, of course, when you announced you were with the Movement for the People's Party, the MPP. Do you have an update about this?
Oh, yes. No, that process is very much in movement. And when I did hear, mediated through my dear brother Chris Hedges, from certain individuals in the Green Party who had their own invitation for the nomination, I said, well, if in fact there's a good chance that I'll be able to have much broader infrastructure, institutional capacity, and make sure that there's no distractions in terms of any kinds of struggles or tensions or various kinds of stigmas associated with parties and persons, it's very important that I'm able to keep the focus where it belongs.
Okay, now that Dr. West is seeking the nomination of the Green Party, I gave it some thought for about maybe close to a minute and decided I was going to rejoin the Green Party in order to help it organize to boost his campaign. I had been a member of the Green Party in the past, and in 2018 left the party because I had trouble seeing a strategy for it moving into the future. But I really think the campaign of Dr. West would be a game changer for the Green Party, help revitalize it, bring new people into it, increase its numbers, maybe even inspire it to reform some of its internal difficulties, which every party has. So I think this is a good path for him to follow. I'm glad he did it. His views are largely in line with mine. This is from a left perspective, and by left, I mean specifically someone critical of capitalism who thinks we need to go beyond capitalism to a different kind of social system. But that doesn't necessarily mean what a lot of people think the left means, or at least the way Republicans, conservatives characterize the left as wanting big government. That's not something I'm too interested in, or wanting this wokeism. I think that's cultural issues are important, but the center of the left for me, when I talk about the left, I'm talking about the idea we need to change our political economic system from one that benefits a wealthy elite, a capitalist class, to one that benefits the broad mass of the people. So that's my view. And why the electoral path? A lot of folks would say, well, you're not going to get anywhere trying to elect people to office. And I think to a degree that's true. You can't just rely on electoral politics. I think it needs to be part of a larger strategy. I would put it this way. An electoral strategy is a necessary but not sufficient means of getting to our ultimate goals. The political system in the United States, our constitutional system, is very resistant to mass political influence and very protective of the property elite. It tends to slow down and diffuse popular energies. And even though some more democratic elements were built into it, extending the right to vote, at least to men early on, property owning men, but modest levels of property, it was designed to diffuse their influence by making it hard for them to wrest power from the people who really had a vested interest in property. So the system, it's hard to get people through. And once you get them, if you do get people elected to office that are more sympathetic to the mass public and trying to benefit them in more radical ways, they will find themselves kind of alone because they won't have a critical mass. It's so hard to elect folks, and they'll be up against a lot of other forces within the government, but they could make some gains, but they'll always be fought against and they got to get cooperation of both houses of Congress, plus the presidency, plus the courts, if the courts get involved in it. So it's a difficult system to navigate for the left, and you're not going to make a lot of headway just with electoral politics. I think we will need to, just as we have in the past, rely on things that go beyond that, like putting mass pressure, lobbying people in elected office, also trying to holding marches and protests. The more people, the better. And ultimately to use disobedience, that is non-cooperation, withdrawing our support, just like they do in labor strikes. They withdraw their support from the workplace, withdrawing our support in various ways or disrupting the normal activities of our society in order to get more attention and build on that. So I think an electoral strategy has to be part of that overall strategy. You do need to have other elements to it, but the importance of electoral activity is, number one, that it is the entry point for most people into paying attention and thinking about larger social issues, and then activating, at least to the extent of voting, paying attention to the campaigns and voting, especially the presidency when there's a presidential campaign. So this is where you're going to get people's attention. And if you can get a message out in there to try to shape the public conversation, you can reach more people that way than you would through a lot of other means, and get them to take action in the direction that you like them to, at least to the extent of voting for candidates for office. So showing greater support, maybe even sometimes getting somebody into office, say a Bernie Sanders, not in the presidency, but in the US Senate, and some of the more progressive members of the US House. So you can show them that political activity can have can get forward in some ways. And it is a way to reach people, get a message to them, get them activated, but it's not enough. So what is the aim here? I think when we're talking about the presidential race in particular, the aim is not to elect somebody who shares a left perspective, because I think that's not likely to happen, whether you pursue the path of the nomination in the Democratic Party's primaries or you pursue the path of an alternative party. I think it's very unlikely someone of a more left orientation is going to get through that process and actually be elected into that office. I think the system is set up in such a way that they'll try to forestall that one way or another. If somebody did, great. It would be more likely to happen in the Democratic Party. But since I think it's unlikely anyway, and I have other reasons for thinking alternative parties are important, I don't think that could be the sole reason. Just getting the right person into office is not sufficient to achieve anything. So it's not just about the messaging either, unless you actually have ways to go help people activate around that message. And trying to elect people is not sufficient, because they'll be continually disappointed in failure to achieve office, or if you get someone into office, they won't be able to achieve a lot. They'll be able to achieve something, but not a lot once they're in office. So just getting a message out is not enough. So if it's not about electing somebody primarily, and it's not about getting a message out primarily, what is it about? I think it's about creating an organized mass movement. I'll say that again, an organized mass movement. 3 parts to that movement. It means that people are actually acting and moving in a particular direction toward a particular goal. And for a leftist, that would be change of our political economic system. Mass means you have to reach an awful lot of people, not everybody, not even the majority, because most people just sit out political contention. To get a critical mass, a lot of people involved in it is important. So you got to get beyond just the small enclaves of people with leftist perspectives to reach more ordinary people, draw them into the movement, help them understand this perspective. And it has to be organized. And this is the key point. Organization means to become an organism, in a sense, to become a body that functions together for in a single way, as a single entity, essentially. Can't be done perfectly. Every political organization has its flaws, but the aim is to create an institution that lasts and in which people can join and continue to participate in, even in between political elections. What often happens, especially in races for Democratic nominations or to elect a progressive to a Democratic office, is they will build a campaign organization, get a lot of people activated and motivated. And then once the campaign's over, either they won or they lost, but those people that were active in the campaign have no place to go to continue to learn, to continue to advance their understanding and advance their political skills, in particular, to actively engage in political action. Instead, they're left waiting for the next election as the next opportunity to actually do something about things, unless they engage in protests and the rest, which are kind of ephemeral as well. They come and go. There's a campaign for something, you'll have a big protest or a lobbying effort, and then it'll disappear. What you need is an institution that can persist across all those kinds of actions. And whenever people get activated, they have some place to go to continue to be activated. If they're at the point of wanting to do that and they have the time to do that, it's a place to continue to be active, to enhance your skills in political organization, and to strategize with other people, and to develop your understanding and perspectives more further, not more further, but further. Take the more out. Don't want to have a anyway, this is a point of grammar. So a mass political movement, we want an institution, we want an organization that can persist between elections and between actions of various kinds to bring people in. And that's the problem, right? When Bernie ran first time around, they tried to create an organization after he lost the nomination, Our Revolution. Its purpose mainly was to then wait and try to elect Bernie again when he hopefully ran for president again, and in the meantime try to elect a few other people to offices around the country. When Bernie ran again and again lost the nomination, a lot of those organizations kind of dispersed, dissipated into different smaller, lesser. Some went into the Democratic Socialists of America, some just dropped out entirely, some tried to continue to pay attention to politics and wait for the next election. So people kind of got scattered because the focal point was that election campaign. There was no lasting institution behind it. Bernie was not running with an alternative political party so that people could join and stay with that party after the election, try again next time. He ran with the Democrats, which means that your option was maybe working with the Democrats, which is always a very frustrating experience because it's controlled by a small group of people who are, and it has its loyal Democrats who are always going to support that elite and that establishment. So they actively try to resist the influence of more left-oriented people within the party. So this is why I think the alternative party path is important to play a role in an organized mass movement, to help create it and sustain one. So what are the options here? If the Democratic Party is not going to be taken over and taken in that direction, there's a possibility. I mean, for folks who are convinced that's the way to go, more power to you. I'd like to see that happen. But let's not argue about whether alternative parties or the Democratic Party path is the more sensible path because they both have great liabilities. So, and you're never going to get everybody together on the same page anyway, because the pros and cons are so well known and they kind of balance each other out. So I think you just have to leave people to make their judgment about where they're more comfortable, where they want to fit, whether they want to try to elect more progressive candidates, more democratic socialist candidates through the Democratic Party primaries, or whether they want to go the alternative party route and try to build a truly large and effective alternative party. Now, we could start from scratch and try to create a new party, as the People's Party was trying to do, and as Andrew Yang, he's kind of sort of on the left, not very far left, is trying to do with his Forward Party. But it's really hard to get a party going from scratch, especially in a country as big as ours with this large population and so many different states that have different ballot laws. It just the knowledge and the political infrastructure to build a party on that scale is very difficult. So why not go with the parties? One of the parties we already have. There's really only one large political party on the left in the United States. That is the Green Party of the United States, which Cornell West just decided he was going to get involved with. The Green Party has been around about 30 years and had a lot of opportunity to build and gain knowledge. Of course, it's remained very small because our political system is very resistant to alternative parties. Hard to get on the ballot, which was not true early in this country's history because now there's a lot of ballot access laws. Hard to get on the ballot, hard to get people to vote for your candidate because they're afraid of so-called spoiler elections. Hard to get media attention because it's hard to build public support. So there's alternative parties do have obstacles and they usually stay small. As I said, I was a member of the Green Party and left in 2018 because I could not see a strategy for moving forward. But what is the alternatives? Not a lot of them. There is the Democratic Socialists of America. They are not a political party. I do find promise there because they are open to the idea of creating a mass political party. But I think what we don't need is both a new Democratic Socialist Party and a Green Party, both vying for supporters. And I don't think the Democratic Socialists, when it does make a decision which direction to go, and I hope it makes a decision at its August convention, whether it's going to continue to try to work within the Democratic Party or it's going to officially sanction working with Dr. West's campaign in the Green Party. Either it's going to eventually create its own party and compete with the Green Party if the Green Party is still around, or it's going to decide to join it sooner and maybe, work with it and work through it. If they can work with the Democrats now, why not with the Green Party? I mean, they're the paths are equally difficult stretching out in front of us. But you can join the Democratic Socialists of America. I have. It won't get someone on a ballot. They can help elect people. They are organized to do that. This is a independent organization of socialists, so it has a lot of it's ideological consistency, not total consistency, but it's on the left in a very clear way. And when it acts, it is clear to what end it's acting toward, that it wants some form of socialism in the United States or moving in that direction anyway. So that's clear. The Green Party is a little more ideologically diffuse. It was created as a party that brought together a lot of separate movements. First of all, the socialist movement, which was in a state of lassitude at the time they first started to develop in the 1980s, the Reagan era. They brought in socialists that didn't have a place to go because the old Socialist Party had broken up. The DSA was around at the time, I think, but it was not very far off the ground. It had its strategy was to influence the platform of the Democratic Party. That didn't interest people so much because they thought the Democratic Party was not doing too well. Anyway, getting a little off the track again. So the Green Party brought together socialists, feminists, environmentalists, labor activists, civil rights leaders, people from a lot of different movements to try to bring them together in one larger group that had a general orientation in the same direction, but it was much more diverse. And in fact, there has been, you know, a lot of push and pull within the party, which is one of the problems that needs resolution. But in any attempt to create a mass party that's even bigger than the tiny Green Party, you're going to have to bring together people of a variety of views and find methods of having them talk to each other and find common ground and maybe move forward in a, you know, just try to find resolution to the issues that divide them. So I think the Green Party is the most promising of the formations on the left. They have about, I think, about 200,000 members around the country. By members, you know, registered voters, not necessarily really active in the party. That's a smaller group. But the Democratic Socialists of America, in contrast, has a little under 100,000, I think, and is kind of leveling off. So I think combining their forces would be a good thing. What I would really like to see is a mass movement that brings in not only the Green Party people and the Democratic Social America people and the most progressive members of the Democratic Party, bring them together in one. But to move in that direction, you have to find a ground where you can work. Work in the current time, meet people, work together with other people, and talk to them about ways that things might come together. So I think there's potential for an organized mass political movement down the road if we can revitalize the Green Party, if the Democratic Social America finds itself on a similar path, if progressive Democrats are disappointed in the alternatives being offered to them and are looking for a home. I think a lot of that can come together. The Green Party is a natural location for anybody who feels like you have to have a clear identity apart from the Democratic Party, that it signals that you're trying to move beyond capitalism. And so I see it as a viable path, really viable, not in the sense that this is guaranteed to work, but this is the only path I can see that makes any sense. Now, with Dr. West getting a lot of attention for the party, and I think he'll stimulate a lot of activism within the party and bring new people in. It gives the Green Party a greater chance at trying to move forward to the future and learn from the past and consolidate whatever gains it makes and move forward from there. That is my hope. So this is why I think electoral politics is important. This is why I think the Green Party is a good location for organizing. I don't think it's the only possible path, but I think it is a good location for organizing, has a lot of pros to it. It's a large organization, it's well established, it has a clear, distinct identity from the Democratic Party. It leans strongly towards the left, towards the positions that I and many other people hold. So I think it is a good organizing tool and it has a path open for it. What are the downsides of the Green Party? Well, our whole political system is deliberately resistant to alternative parties. We need to change our voting methods. Green Party, by the way, has been very active in that for at least 20 years. I've been part of that, trying to bring ranked choice voting to the United States. We've had a few successes. And then moving into the star voting, I think that's even better than ranked choice voting. Green Party hasn't picked it up yet, but they are leaders in trying to change voting methods among other groups with different ideas, but they have been very active in that cause. They see the need to change the system, in other words, to make it more viable for alternative party. So the con is it's difficult for them in the current environment to move forward to try to actually convince people they are worthy of a look in elections because of the hard for them to elect anybody. They're relatively small, even though they're the biggest, left-wing organization in the country, I think. They have internal issues about how they're going to run, and democratic issues like that. A lot of contention over the presidential nomination last time around. So those things need to be straightened out. But those things are all things that you're going to encounter anywhere. And you may as well roll up your sleeves and expect you're going to work on it, no matter which direction you go, even within the Democratic Party, unless you simply sit back and say, well, let's let the people who lead it now lead it wherever it's going, which I think is in the direction of nowhere that's going to pacify people, and they'll continue to turn to people like Donald Trump, thinking we need some kind of radical change, and the Democratic Party is offering no such thing. All right, then. So let's talk a little bit about the Green Party then, and its both in its process for nominating a president, or a sketch of that, so you have an idea, and then the ballot access question. First of all, the process is pretty similar to the major parties in that they have different state organizations that elect delegates to a national convention, and the delegates at the national convention then majority vote for the presidential nominee. Whoever gets the majority vote gets the nomination, and then that candidate picks a vice presidential candidate, and the convention then votes to ratify that decision. The timeline is like this: late this year and through the first half of next year, just like the major parties, they're going to be holding these methods. They won't have public primaries because they're not big enough to get on the government-run primaries, but they'll have internal elections to select delegates. That'll start late this year. So if you want to get involved in this, you do have time to join the party, become a qualified member wherever you are, and participate in the delegate selection process. The delegates then meet in summer sometimes, and they vote. So you could help elect delegates that will favor Cornell West as the nominee. The delegates are assigned. The only rules from the national organization for the state organizations is that there should be diversity in the delegates that you send to the convention, and there should be rough proportional representation in support for each of the nominees running for that office. So if you had more than one candidate for that office, then you'd find out in your state organization how much support there is for each candidate, and then assign delegates based on those proportions. So it's supposed to be fair that way. There are states that have processes that are already well organized. There are states where they're not organized, green parties, and it's fairly easy to get one organized there. I doubt if anyone from those states is listening to me where they don't already have an organized party, but you got to get 15 people from 3 different local organizations, and they can hold a convention and then elect delegates, which means, you know, if you got 3 people in 3 different cities in your state, and they each formed a local organization and came together to have a state convention, they can select delegates. In some states, there is not, they don't have registration by party. And in that case, there's other membership qualifications. So you should look into the situation in your individual state. It differs state by state. And the good thing about those states is it allows you the option often to vote in the Democratic primary and also participate in the Green Party. I don't know if there's any way they can prevent that from happening, but it's a different, you should look into that if you're there. I'm not, I'm in Oregon. You have to be registered with a political party in order to participate in the major party primaries. So look into your state's rules to find out whether or not you can, if you want to keep the option open of voting in the Democratic primary, whether that's possible, at what point you would need to be registered with the Democrats. And so you have some idea of the timeline. If you want to do something to help the Green Party, but also vote in the Democratic primary, you need to know your state's rules on being registered with that party and whether you can participate in the primaries or caucuses that way. Also in the Green Party, you should look at their rules in your state about becoming a member of the party if you want to participate in that. So fairly simple to get involved in a state party if that's the route you're following, which I'm going to follow, and then try to elect delegates to the national convention, get them elected. So it's fairly simple, I think. There's no super delegates representing the party establishment. They all come from the state delegations, as well as territories like Guam, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and delegates from caucuses as well. That's something different. So they will have a representation of various caucuses within the party. Let's turn now to the question of ballot access. In the various talk shows online that I've seen, they had all kind of wild guesses as to how many ballot lines the Green Party actually has in the United States right now in the various states. Everything from all 50 states to most states to about 20 states. Well, in truth, it is closer to 20, actually a little less than 20 where they have ballot lines, to the best of my knowledge looking into this. So let's look at this chart on the screen, which says it was current as of January of this year. So there may have been some changes for it. As you see in it, the green shaded states are ones that already have a ballot access line for 2024. And those include, that's about 16 states, including on the West Coast, Oregon and California, and the Southwest, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, in South Mississippi River area, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, which is surprising of those states, in the upper Midwest, both Wisconsin and Michigan, and then in the Northeast Maine, coming down the eastern seaboard, we've got parties in West Virginia, Delaware, North and South Carolina, and Florida. Montana is green, but it has that shading, which means they're not sure. Its electoral status was in dispute, but I think it's been settled since then. So they may have a ballot line as well, which would bring it to 17. So it's 17 cases where we're pretty sure the Green Party has a ballot line. Now, there are 4 states. These are the ones in yellow where there are legal cases trying to maintain a ballot line or say that they did qualify, but for some reason the state refused to recognize them and give them a ballot line. Those states are Kansas, Oklahoma, Indiana, and New York. The only one I really know much about is New York. I know the state legislature significantly raised the requirements for having a ballot line. You have to get a lot more signatures than before, more than twice as many, or a much higher percentage of the vote in particular elections in order to get on the ballot. They're trying to exclude parties. So the Libertarian Party and the Green Party brought a lawsuit in New York. I think that may have been decided against the parties recently, against the alternative parties. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that one has been resolved, which would mean they don't have a ballot line. So these 4 are still in limbo, to the best of my knowledge. There's 4 more in pink where they say there is party building in progress. I think what this means is that these are states that got into trouble with the national and were disaffiliated and are now trying to, there's work going on to try to get them back in their good graces. I say that because of those 4, Alaska is one of them. They nominated Jesse Ventura as their presidential nominee in the last presidential election, 2020, even though the national convention nominated Howie Hawkins as the presidential candidate. Well, Alaska went its own way in the presidential race, so they got disaffiliated. Rhode Island, even more egregiously, nominated Joe Biden as the presidential candidate for their Green Party. They got disaffiliated. And then in Georgia, there was something about amendments to their platform that were regarded as transphobic, so they were disaffiliated as well. Rhode Island is also in that pink group. I don't know what's going on up there, but those 4 states, they may end up on the ballot if they can resolve their problems with the national. Don't know really where those stand right now. So that's potentially another 4. Could be up to what, about 21 or so, getting near half the states. And the rest in gray are not yet on the ballot, which means some of them have been on the ballot before. They just lost a lot of members after bad showings in presidential elections. So there's potential there to get people back together, especially if they get energized around a campaign like the campaign of Dr. West. So to sum up, they have nearly half the states already seem to be in the bag as far as ballot lines. If we have a good, strong campaign for the presidency, we may be able to build parties in a number of other states. But again, this is not an issue of actually electing somebody. Even if you get ballot lines in all 50 states, it doesn't mean you're going to be electing a president. You have to get a majority of the public to vote for you in a particular state in order to win that state's electoral votes. And then you have to get a certain number of electoral votes, more than a majority, to actually win the presidency. And if there's a split vote in the Electoral College, it goes to the House of Representatives, which is not going to pick your party. So it's not about actually electing somebody. It's about building a massful organizing movement. I'm getting that wrong already. It's about building an organized mass movement. This is a vehicle for doing that, but it is important to get as high a percentage of the vote as possible to show that the party is moving forward, that it's having an effect, that it is something that's being revitalized, that people are being attracted, it's doing things, it's on the map, it's having presence. So getting a very high overall vote across the country is important, which means if you have a few states that get very high levels of votes, it can help boost it. They have that always elusive goal of breaking the 5% of the national vote, that objective, but it's tough to do. If they did do it, they would get money for their presidential convention and their presidential campaign for future elections, which would be great. But getting a high percentage of the vote is the name of the game. You're not going to elect the presidency. Also, changing the conversation, building a organized mass movement, all those things, that's what it's about. So that's my take on Dr. West and the Green Party at this point. I'll be commenting on it more as time goes on, as well as other things that turn up or other things that I'm engaged in right now. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you come back and listen to some more. If you like what you hear, whether on the podcast or in this video version of this, like, subscribe, tell other people about it, all that stuff. And the music at the opening and closing of this, again, is courtesy of Joey Helpish and Patty Rhodes. Thanks for listening. Bye.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus. The moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.